I bought a house for myself, not for my sister, not for my parents, for me. And they lost their minds. Maybe I should have seen it coming. But when you grow up playing second fiddle to the family's star child, you learn to lower your expectations. My name is Caleb, I'm 31, and I've spent my entire life in the shadow of my sister Mia. Mia is 3 years younger, the golden girl. The one who could do no wrong even when she absolutely undeniably did. She got new clothes every season. Piano lessons, horse camp. Meanwhile, I got told to be thankful and reminded that life doesn't hand out handouts. At 15, I was bussing tables at a diner while Mia got a sweet 16 party with a DJ and a freaking chocolate fountain. I didn't even get a text that day. But I played along, smiled, pretended it didn't sting, because that's what was expected of me. When I graduated high school, there were no applause or congratulatory banners, just a curt, "So, what's your plan?" Now I worked my way through college with 2 part-time jobs and a steady diet of ramen noodles and stress. Mia, on the other hand, she bounced from one major to the next and somehow always had her rent covered. My parents said it was because she was still finding herself. Apparently, I'd been found too early. After school, I started an auto detailing business. Nothing fancy, just me in a rented garage, long hours, broken tools, angry customers who thought a Groupon entitled them to miracles, but I stuck it out. By year 4, I was turning a decent profit. Not yacht-level rich, but enough to start dreaming about buying a small house. My own place, my own rules. I should have known that dream wouldn't sit well with my parents. Whenever I mentioned looking at houses, they'd nod vaguely, then immediately pivot. "Your sister's been having such a rough time lately," my mom would sigh. "Her lease is up soon. She just needs a bit of stability." My dad would nod solemnly like he was delivering a verdict. You know it would really help her to have a place she could count on. I'd hear it and think, wait, are you saying I should buy a house for Mia? They never said the words outright, but they didn't need to. The implication was as clear as a billboard. I ignored it at first, let them talk, focused on saving. Until one afternoon I stopped by their place to drop off some tools for Dad and I overheard them talking in the kitchen. "She's been looking at that 3-bedroom near Oak Street," Mom said. "If Caleb gets approved, that would be perfect." My dad's voice was low but firm. He's responsible. He'll do the right thing. It hit me like a gut punch. They expected me to buy a house for her, with my money, my savings, my dream. I didn't confront them. I just left. Went home, sat in the dark for a long while, and stared at the cracked ceiling of my 1-bedroom apartment. I remembered the lectures about sacrifice, the nights I worked double shifts while Mia blew money on last-minute trips to Vegas, the years I'd quietly slipped my parents cash when the roof leaked or the heater broke, only to find out later they'd bought Mia a much-needed spa retreat. I wasn't mad anymore, just done. The next morning, Mia called me, bubbly as ever, talking about how she'd found the cutest little place and couldn't wait to move in. She didn't say how she planned to afford it. She didn't need to. She already assumed I'd foot the bill. She even laughed and said, "You can crash in the guest room if you ever need to get away." That was it. I didn't argue, didn't announce my plan. I found a modest fixer-upper 30 minutes away, put down a deposit, and signed the papers. Mine. No strings, no family obligations, just me. I thought I had time before anyone found out. Maybe a few quiet months, a chance to nest. Wrong. 3 weeks later, my phone exploded. Missed calls, angry texts, Mia, my mom. Even my Aunt Linda, who hasn't texted me since the 2010 Super Bowl. The message that confirmed it all? Why did the realtor tell us you already bought a house? So that was how they found out. The confrontation wasn't long in coming. Less than 24 hours later, there was a knock at my brand new front door. I didn't have to check the peephole to know who it was. Mom, Dad, and Mia all standing there like they were about to stage an intervention. Only I wasn't the one spiraling. I opened the door, stepped aside, and braced for the storm. It started soft. "How could you do this without telling us?" Mom asked, her voice trembling. "You knew Mia needed help," Dad added, tone sharp. Mia, of course, said nothing. She just stood there with her arms crossed, waiting for me to explain myself like a misbehaving employee. I didn't argue, just listened. Let them vent. Then Mom dropped the hammer. "You can't seriously be planning to live here alone. Not when your sister's been looking for months. Not when we all thought this was for her." They truly believed it. That's when I realized it wasn't just favoritism. It was entitlement. They saw my success as a family asset. One to be redistributed, not earned. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't yell. I just said I bought this house for me, because no one else ever has. The silence was deafening. Then Dad said something that should have hurt but didn't. "If you go through with this, don't expect us to be part of your life." I looked him in the eye and replied, "That's a shame, but I finally get to be part of mine." They left in a flurry of disbelief and barely concealed rage. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Bye, Goya. Yeah, that was the end. That was just the beginning. I didn't expect peace after that confrontation, but I also didn't expect the full-scale family meltdown that followed. Within 2 days, my phone turned into a digital war zone. Voicemails from mom ranging from tearful to scathing dad's passive-aggressive messages laced with guilt, and Mia's full-on tantrums typed out in long dramatic texts like I'd personally destroyed her future with one selfish act. Apparently, by buying a home for myself, I had undermined the family plan. I didn't even know we had one. I didn't reply. I just muted the thread and got back to unpacking boxes. The kitchen was still cluttered with bubble wrap, the living room looked like a second-hand furniture maze, and I hadn't figured out how to install the blinds in the bedroom yet. But every square inch of it was mine, and that fact made every inconvenience feel like a win. Still, there was this knot in my chest that wouldn't loosen. Years of being the dutiful son, the reliable one, don't disappear just because you hang up on a guilt trip. And Mia wasn't letting it go. She sent me a long message about how she'd already told her friends she was moving into a new place, my place. She wrote, "It's humiliating to have to tell everyone the plan changed because you got selfish." I almost laughed, as if she ever once asked what I wanted. Then came the group chat bomb. A message from Mia, but clearly not meant for the whole family. She was venting to someone else about how we just need to keep pushing him, he'll cave eventually. He always does. She even called it a strategy pressure from all sides. Mom would play emotional, dad would play firm, and she'd be the victim caught in the middle. It was surreal reading it, like watching a magician reveal every trick in the act. Except this wasn't an illusion, it was my life they were trying to hijack. I took screenshots. Not to use against them, but to remind myself I wasn't imagining things. It was right there in her own words. I was never the brother. I was the backup plan. The one expected to clean up the mess and smile while doing it. That night, I changed every password I had. Bank email, even the smart lock on my front door. Then I called my lawyer. He wasn't cheap, but he was sharp and he didn't hesitate. "Caleb, unless your name is on a contract promising her the house, they have no legal claim. They can whine, but they can't touch it." That was the first time I exhaled fully in weeks. Of course, that didn't stop the campaign. A few days later, I saw Mia had posted on social media a moody selfie with a caption that read, "Imagine thinking family would have your back and finding out they're the ones pushing you off the ledge." The comments were brutal. Her friends chimed in with, "You deserve better," and he's always been weird anyway. A few even tagged me. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have things to say, but because I'd finally learned that silence was more powerful than explanation. But Mia didn't stop there. She launched a GoFundMe. I wish I was joking. The title was "Help Me Get the Home I Was Promised." She wrote this sob story about being misled by her own brother, how she was on the brink of homelessness, and how she needed help starting fresh. It was manipulative, dramatic, and filled with just enough truth to sound believable if you didn't know better. Her donation totaled $20 in 3 days. And that came from someone with a username that looked suspiciously like a burner account. I thought about exposing her, about posting those screenshots and dragging everything into the light. But I waited. Then one night, I had dinner with a friend who said something that stuck with me. If someone's drowning in a mess they made, throwing them a rope only pulls you in too. That's when I knew what I had to do. I made a single post. A photo of the house. Me holding a toolbox standing in front of the porch with a caption that said, "Hard work pays off. First home. Bought and paid for. No cosigners, no strings, just earned." I didn't tag anyone. Didn't drop names. But people noticed. My inbox filled with congratulations from coworkers, old classmates, even some cousins who hadn't talked to me in years. And somewhere in that sea of messages was silence from the ones who'd spent their lives talking over me. But the real twist came when a mutual friend messaged me privately. She said, "Hey, just so you know, Mia's been telling people she put money into your house, that it was supposed to be hers and you changed the locks." It was so absurd I almost didn't care. Almost. That was when I decided to post the receipts, literally. I uploaded a series of screenshots to my story, just 24 hours, no drama. Mia's texts about the strategy, her comments about wearing me down, her bragging about how he's always been predictable. No captions, no callouts, just facts. The fallout was immediate. People started asking questions. The GoFundMe quietly disappeared. Mia deleted a bunch of her posts and went private. My mom texted me a long paragraph about airing dirty laundry and how disappointed she was. I didn't reply. Dad called, left a voicemail that ended with, "If you keep this up, you're no longer welcome here." And for the first time in my life, that felt like a gift. I didn't want war, I just wanted freedom. And I had it now, a home that was mine, a life that was mine, and a peace that didn't require anyone else's permission. But deep down, I knew they weren't done. Not yet. The real battle that was still coming. I should have known silence from my parents was never just silence. It was always the calm before the storm. And sure enough, it didn't take long before the next move came, disguised in a plain white envelope hand-delivered to my mailbox. No return address, but I didn't need one. I recognized my dad's handwriting on the back flap. Inside was a legal notice, a formal letter claiming emotional harm and misunderstanding over property expectations. In short, they were threatening to sue me. Not just demand I give up the house, no, that would have been too simple. They wanted damages, they wanted compensation. They wanted to punish me for not folding. I sat at my kitchen table, letter in one hand, coffee in the other, and just stared at it for a long minute. I wasn't surprised, just disappointed. Like watching someone you hoped would do better walk right off a cliff, eyes wide open. The language in the letter was rich. Family reliance, implied agreement, breach of verbal understanding, basically because I didn't stop them from believing something that wasn't true. They thought I owed them something. I forwarded the letter to my lawyer. He called me 20 minutes later, half laughing. They don't have a case, Caleb. This is pure intimidation. But it does mean one thing: they're not done trying. And they weren't. Over the next few days, the phone calls came back. First, my mom, her voice cracking as she tried to sound concerned. We just want to fix this. Let's have dinner, talk things through. Then Dad, more direct. This isn't about the house, it's about respect. You've embarrassed us. I didn't answer. Not once. I let the calls pile up, the voicemails rot in the inbox. Because by now I'd learned something important: responding only gave them fuel. They weren't calling to understand. They were calling to control the narrative. The one where I was the selfish son, the cold-hearted brother, the reason our family was falling apart. The problem is, that story only works when I'm playing the role they wrote for me. And I wasn't acting anymore, like. But Mia. She never missed a cue. A few days after the legal stunt, she showed up on my front step, unannounced as usual. She had on sunglasses like she was avoiding paparazzi and held a coffee like it was a peace offering. I didn't invite her in, just opened the door and leaned against the frame waiting. I came to talk, she said. No drama. Which, coming from her, was the first red flag. She launched into this speech about how misunderstood she felt, how she never asked for the house directly, and how everything had just spiraled. She painted herself as a victim of bad communication, like we were two coworkers caught in an office email thread gone wrong. Then came the real ask. I'm not asking for the house anymore, she said, hands up like a hostage negotiator. I just need a place to stay, just until I get on my feet. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so predictable. The entitlement never died, it just changed outfits. I didn't yell, didn't argue, just shook my head and told her she should call Mom and Dad. She hesitated, and for a split second, I saw it the truth. She couldn't. Because even they had limits. And when I exposed their plan, when the screenshots went public, their little circle of enablers had started asking questions. The kind of questions they couldn't answer without admitting they'd let things go too far. Apparently, even golden children can fall out of favor when the curtain's pulled back. I thought you were better than this, Mia muttered. I shrugged. I thought you were honest. We were both wrong. She left in a flurry of bitter silence, probably hoping I'd call her back and apologize. I didn't. The next few weeks were quiet. Too quiet. No calls, no letters, no surprise visitors. I kept expecting another ambush, some fresh attempt at manipulation, but nothing came. For the first time in years, my life was still. I woke up when I wanted, drank my coffee in peace, worked on my business without dread clawing at the back of my mind. My home wasn't just walls and windows, it was mine inside and out. But then one day I stopped by the local hardware store to pick up some supplies, and while I waited in line, I heard a familiar voice behind me. Mia. Loud like always, she was talking to someone at the customer service counter about needing work. Something about needing to build up hours before her benefits kicked in. Her tone had that edge of performative exhaustion, the kind that begged for pity more than patience. I didn't turn around, didn't make eye contact. Just paid for my stuff and walked out, my chest lighter than it had been in years. That moment, hearing her voice from a distance and knowing I owed her nothing, that was freedom. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet kind of rightness. The kind you feel in your bones when no one else is watching. Later that night, I got a final message from my mom. A text, just a few lines. I hope one day you understand what family means. Until then, we'll be praying for you. I didn't respond, because I do know what family means. I just finally understood that it's not defined by blood, it's defined by respect. And if they couldn't give me that, then they weren't my family in any way that mattered. The house still needed work. The gutters were a mess, the backyard overgrown, and the upstairs sink had a leak I hadn't gotten around to fixing. But every time I picked up a tool or tightened a bolt or painted a wall, I wasn't just fixing a house, I was rebuilding something bigger. Something that had been buried under years of obligation, guilt, and manipulation. I was rebuilding myself. I didn't expect closure, I wasn't chasing it. But there's something strange about silence that used to scare me. Now it felt like a gift I didn't know I'd earned. The phone didn't buzz anymore with fake concern or veiled demands. No sudden knocks, no guilt-laced messages, just stillness. And in that stillness, I started noticing things about myself that had been buried for years. Like how I'd always held my breath during family dinners waiting for the next jab wrapped in a joke. Or how I used to double-check every expense before admitting to buying something for myself because it always came with a look or a comment. Now I was breathing deeper, eating better, sleeping like I hadn't in years. The nightmares stopped, not the horror movie kind, but the real ones. The ones where I was back in the family house being told what I owed, what I should have done, what I had to give up. I filled the silence with small victories. I built a shelf in the garage, learned how to fix that upstairs leak, repainted the guest room a deep forest green because it made the morning light feel like something sacred. No one told me to. No one supervised. It was mine every choice, every mistake, every fix. It was the kind of freedom I didn't know I'd been starving for. Then, one morning, I stepped out onto the porch with a cup of coffee and saw a familiar car parked across the street. It wasn't trying to be subtle, my dad's SUV, the one with the dented bumper Mia had put there during her learning phase, but never paid to fix. He didn't get out, just sat there. I watched for a minute, waiting to see if he'd approach. He didn't. After a few more minutes, he drove off. No message, no call, nothing. Just surveillance, like he wanted to prove something to himself, or maybe just see if I looked like I regretted everything. I didn't. Later that afternoon, a letter showed up in my mailbox. Not legal this time, just a folded piece of lined paper. No envelope, just ink and pressure. Dad's handwriting again. It read, "You're not the son I raised, but I hope one day you'll come back to your senses." That was it. Not a word about what they'd done. Not even a hint of acknowledgement. Just that tired old story how I had failed them. Not the other way around. I didn't rip it up. I didn't save it either. I tossed it in the junk drawer under a stack of outdated coupons and spare keys. That felt like the right place for it. Out of sight, but not hidden. A quiet reminder of what I was never going back to. But peace has its way of being temporary. Because one night I got a message I wasn't expecting. From Mia. Again. But this time it wasn't demanding or angry, it was short. Just 3 words: I need help. I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it, block the number, and keep moving. But another part, the one trained from birth to fix things, to make things right, hesitated. I didn't reply, not that night. I let it sit there, a digital echo of a life I was no longer living. The next morning she called. I let it ring. She left a voicemail. Her voice didn't sound angry this time. It sounded small, deflated. "I've got nowhere else to go," she said. "They won't take me back. I messed up, I know that. But please," that please felt heavier than it should have. Not because it moved me, but because I could hear something I hadn't heard from her in a long time: uncertainty. The kind that can't be faked. The kind that comes when someone finally realizes their parachute isn't opening. I spent the whole day thinking about it. Walking in circles around the living room, picking things up and putting them back down without reason. She wasn't just looking for shelter, she was looking for relief from consequence. A place to land after jumping too many cliffs. And she thought I'd still be the net. That night, I called her back. She picked up immediately, like she'd been sitting with the phone in her lap. She started to explain something about a friend who bailed a job that fell through a rent check that bounced. I didn't interrupt, I just listened. When she finally stopped talking, I spoke. Calm, direct. "I'm sorry you're in this place, but I'm not the answer anymore." She went quiet. Then she laughed, soft, bitter. "Of course, you finally get your own place and suddenly you're too good for the rest of us." I didn't rise to it. I said no. I finally learned what enough looks like, and I'm not giving it up again. She hung up without another word. I thought that would be the last of it. But a week later, I ran into her again, this time at the grocery store. I was in the frozen aisle comparing 2 brands of waffles. She was 2 carts over, talking loudly to someone on the phone. Saying things like, some people just forget who raised them, and he thinks he's better now because he has a mortgage. I didn't say a word, just turned down the next aisle and moved on. But as I walked away, I felt something I hadn't before: not guilt. Not sadness, just clarity. That I could live in the same world as her without being the part of her orbit. A few days after that, I got a message from an old friend of Mia's, someone who used to come around during her better years. She wrote, "I don't know what happened between you two, but I'm proud of you. It's not easy to choose yourself when your whole family expects you to disappear for them." That message hit deeper than I expected. Because she was right, it wasn't easy. It was never easy. But it was necessary. So I kept choosing. Every day. I chose to fix the creaky floorboard instead of fix my family. I chose to plant tomatoes in the backyard instead of plant myself in someone else's guilt. I chose my peace over their narrative. And slowly, something beautiful started to grow. Not just in the house, but in me. I didn't tell anyone about the garden. It wasn't much, a few wooden beds I built myself, some starter plants from the nursery down the road, a patch of soil that finally felt like mine to tend. But every morning I walked out barefoot onto the dewy grass, crouched low and checked on the tomatoes like they held some secret to the life I was building. And in a way they did. Every leaf, every sprout, every inch of green stretching toward the sun was proof that I could make something grow on my own from scratch, with no one hovering over my shoulder telling me I wasn't enough. One morning while I was pruning the basil, my neighbor called out from across the fence. We never talked much, just passing waves and occasional nods. Her name was Lena. Late 50s, sharp voice, soft eyes. She smiled, pointed at the garden, and said, "Looks like peace." I nodded, not needing to say anything. She got it. Some people do without needing the backstory. A few weeks passed. Work was steady, the house was taking shape, and I was finally living without holding my breath. I'd even started sleeping with the windows open again, something I hadn't done in years. But the thing about healing is it doesn't erase the past. It just stops letting it control you. And sometimes, even with the doors locked and the boundaries clear, the past finds a crack. It came one afternoon in the form of an envelope. Plain, stiff, no return address again. Inside a typed letter. This time not from my dad or Mia, but from their lawyer. Apparently they weren't done. The letter was full of fluff about unresolved emotional harm and damaged familial trust. What it boiled down to was this: they wanted an apology. A public one. Something to correct the narrative and preserve family dignity. No lawsuit this time, but a clear warning if I didn't comply, they'd go back to legal threats. I sat on the porch with the letter in one hand, a cup of tea in the other, and watched the wind move through the garden. The sheer irony of it made me laugh, not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. They had lost control, and instead of reflecting, they were regrouping, rebranding the situation. My refusal to be used wasn't just inconvenient, it was unacceptable to them. That night, I didn't write back. Instead, I pulled out a notebook. Not for them, for me. I wrote down everything they'd done, not to document, but to process. The small humiliations, the years of emotional accounting, the unspoken expectation that I'd always choose family even when family didn't choose me. By the time I filled the last page, I felt lighter. Not because it erased anything, but because it made something clear. I didn't owe them restoration. I owed myself honesty. A few days later, Mia posted something online again. Another indirect jab. A picture of an empty living room with a caption about starting over from scratch because some people leave you no choice. She was still telling her version of the story, the one where she was abandoned, betrayed, denied what was rightfully hers. I didn't comment. I didn't even care. But what surprised me was the comment section. This time people weren't echoing her pain, they were asking questions. One of her friends wrote, "Didn't your brother just buy a house for himself? Why was he supposed to give it to you?" Another added, "I'd kill for a sibling who worked that hard." Mia deleted the post within hours, but the damage was done. Her control over the narrative was slipping. Not because I fought back, but because truth has a quiet way of surfacing when you stop feeding lies. It was strange seeing the tide turn. My parents too had gone quieter. No more letters, no more calls, just silence. And instead of fearing it, I welcomed it. I realized they had finally hit the wall. Maybe they were tired. Maybe they were ashamed. Or maybe for the first time they saw I wasn't bluffing. Then one evening, Lena knocked on my door. She had a small dish of peach cobbler in her hands and a knowing smile on her face. "You've had a long season," she said, handing me the plate. I invited her in. We sat at my table, the same one I'd assembled from a YouTube video, and sweat. She didn't pry, but she listened. I told her a version of the story enough for her to understand, not enough to relive. When I was done, she nodded and said, "Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stop explaining yourself." That stuck with me. After she left, I sat on the porch again. The sky was bruised with sunset, and the breeze carried the smell of fresh basil. I thought about how much had changed, not just in my surroundings, but in me. I wasn't the fixer anymore. I wasn't the default safety net, the fallback plan, the reliable one who swallowed everything so others could breathe easier. I was just a man in his own home finally unlearning the lie that love means sacrifice without boundaries. That night, I slept with the windows open and the back door unlocked, not because I was careless, but because for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of who might come knocking. It didn't end with a final confrontation. No slamming doors, no public apologies, no big showdown. Just the slow unraveling of an old story that no longer fit. That's how real endings happen, not with fireworks, but with silence that doesn't sting anymore. A few weeks after Lena brought over the cobbler, I got one last message from Mia. No greeting, no backstory. Just, I'm moving out of state. Don't worry, you won't hear from me again. I read it twice. Not because it shocked me, but because part of me was waiting for the usual twist, the follow-up ask the guilt bait. It didn't come. And for once I believed her. Maybe not forever, but for now it was enough. The next time I saw my parents was by accident. I was leaving the hardware store loading a few bags of mulch into my car when I spotted them pulling into a spot 2 aisles over. They didn't see me. Or maybe they did and chose not to. Either way, we didn't speak. I watched them walk inside, still moving in that synchronized rhythm of shared disapproval, and felt nothing. No bitterness, no urge to wave, no ache. Just neutrality, that strange middle ground between goodbye and don't care. By then, the house had fully become mine, not just legally, but emotionally. The walls held new colors. The garden out back had grown wild with basil, mint tomatoes, and too many sunflowers. I liked how chaotic it looked. Nothing perfect, everything alive. Friends started visiting more. Not many, just the real ones. We'd sit on the porch at night with cold drinks and quiet music, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to explain anything about my past. I wasn't the guy with the dramatic family. I was just Caleb, the one with the crooked porch light and the softest lawn on the block. People ask if I ever reached out again. If I called? If I tried to mend things once the dust settled? The answer is no. Not out of spite, but because healing doesn't always mean circling back. Sometimes it means accepting that some relationships were only held together by your silence. And when you stop playing the role, the whole play folds, and that's okay. I kept building. Not just the house, but my business. It grew. Steady, honest work. I hired 2 part-timers, good kids, both from the kind of homes I used to dream about having. They call me boss, but they know I hate that word. We laugh a lot. There's music in the garage now, coffee always brewing. No one walks on eggshells. That more than anything feels like wealth. One Sunday, as I was weeding the garden, Lena wandered over again. She leaned against the fence, squinting at the sunflowers, and said, "You know, for someone who's been through hell, you sure make peace look easy." I smiled, wiped the sweat from my forehead, and said, "It's not easy. I just stopped letting guilt feel like love." She nodded like she understood. Because she did. I think we all grow up with this idea that family means unconditional loyalty even when that loyalty breaks you. But that's not love. That's control wearing a nice shirt. Real love has boundaries. Real love doesn't guilt you into self-erasure. And once you know that, truly know that you can never unsee it. Sometimes I wonder if my parents ever talk about me. If they spin a story about the ungrateful son who walked away. Maybe they do. Maybe that's how they sleep at night. But that's not my story to fix. I've got my own now. And it's not tragic. It's not bitter. It's quiet and solid and earned. The seasons changed and I watched them all from that porch. Fall painted the yard gold. Winter made everything slow and soft. Spring exploded green in the garden beds, and summer felt like arrival. No more waiting for someone to come back. No more hoping they'd finally see me. I saw myself fully, clearly, without needing their permission. I didn't build this house to prove anything. I built it because no one ever gave me a place where I could just exist without strings. And now every creaky floorboard, every uneven cabinet, every breeze through the screen door reminds me I did this. Not because I was the strongest or the smartest, but because I finally believed I was worth the space I took up. One night, I sat on the porch alone. The sky was full of stars, the kind you only notice when you stop staring at your phone. I thought about that first day I stood in this driveway with keys in my hand and doubt in my gut. I thought about the voice in my head that used to ask, is it selfish to want more? And I answered it out loud to the dark to myself. No, it's necessary. And that's the truth I live by now. I didn't abandon my family. I just stopped abandoning myself. Story 2. Because the $5,000 I gave my parents each month wasn't enough, they threw me and my pregnant wife out on Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving. In my family, things have always been the same, a blend of unwritten expectations and turkey customs. However, the air felt heavier this year, as if there were something lurking beneath the surface. I couldn't get rid of the feeling that this day wouldn't go as smoothly as the ones that had come before it. As I drove to my parents' house with my wife Sarah sitting next to me, her hand resting on her expanding belly. Our family get-togethers were routine. The turkey would cause my mother a lot of fuss. My two brothers Ryan and Ethan would drink excessively and recite the same old stale tales about their high school football days while my dad presided over the table. Usually the comfort of familiarity encircled us like a cozy blanket. However, there was an advantage this time. A slight fissure in that comfortable exterior. My father, as usual, began dinner by carving the turkey and giving out portions and uninvited advice. The dialogue went fairly smoothly. First, Ethan grumbled about his boss not appreciating his unparalleled work ethic, while Ryan boasted about a new car he had leased. I smiled and nodded the way I always did, but my mind was elsewhere. I'd been keeping a close eye on our finances lately, preparing for the arrival of our first child. My auto repair shop had been steady, but the economy was unpredictable, and I'd learned the hard way not to take stability for granted. Then, as the plates were being cleared and pie was being served, my father cleared his throat. That sound always preceded something I'd rather not hear, and this time was no different. Jana, I've been thinking about the support you've been giving the family. It's been a real blessing, son. Truly. But with inflation and everything going up, I think it's time we adjusted the amount. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even a suggestion. My father said it like a decree, as if I had no say in the matter. For the past 3 years, I've been giving my parents $5,000 a month, a contribution that had started when my dad had a health scare and my mom insisted they needed extra help. I never questioned it. They were family, but $5,000 was already a significant portion of my earnings, and the shop wasn't exactly printing money. Ryan jumped in before I could respond. Yeah, John, that's only fair. Everything costs more now, you know. And mom and dad deserve to live comfortably. We all do. Really, Ethan nodded, adding his $2 to the dollars. Plus, I could really use some help with my student loans. I've been drowning here, and it's not like you're strapped for cash. You've got the shop, and Sarah's got her job. You're in a good spot. I glanced at Sarah, hoping for some kind of signal, some reassurance. Her face was calm, but her eyes met mine with a silent message. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. That was the kind of person she was, supportive to her core. Even when things got messy, I took a deep breath and leaned forward, my hands clasped on the table. The room seemed to hold its breath with me. Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you about this. With the baby on the way, we're trying to tighten our budget and save for the future. I'm going to have to cut back on what I spend each month starting next month. It'll be $2,500 instead of $5,000. The silence that followed was deafening. My father's face turned a shade darker and my mother's fork clinked against her plate as she froze. Bite. Ryan and Ethan exchanged incredulous looks before turning their gaze back to me. What do you mean, cut back? Ryan finally asked, his voice rising. Do you have any idea how much we count on that money? Ethan was less subtle. That's a joke, right? You can't just decide to cut us off like that. Family helps. Family. The words hit harder than I expected, like a punch I didn't see coming. Family helps. Family. Wasn't that exactly what I've been doing for years? I never demanded anything in exchange. I never grumbled about the wait, and now I was the villain when I needed to change my priorities. At long last, my father spoke up. We brought you up better than this, John. I assumed you knew how important it is to take care of yourself. You are disappointing all of us if you break this promise. Under the table, I sensed Sarah's hand on my arm, a tiny anchor that kept me rooted. My resolve remained unwavering. I said, maintaining a steady tone, I'm not backing down on anything. I'm getting used to our new situation. I can't put you ahead of my own child as you are requesting. The tense atmosphere in the room was oppressive. With a start, my mother got up and started washing dishes while whispering something about unappreciative kids. My brothers didn't look at me. They had a mixture of disappointment and rage on their faces. Steel could be scorched by my father's glare. At last he spoke once more. I had never heard him speak in such a cold tone. You might be better off leaving. Spend some time reflecting on what matters most. I refrained from arguing. I stood with Sarah. Without saying another word, we gathered our coats and walked out the door, closing behind us. I could feel the burden of what had just transpired pressing down on me. The course was heavier than I had anticipated, and I had finally stood my ground. There was a silence that weighed more than words on the drive home from my parents' house. Sarah sat next to me with her hand on her stomach. glancing occasionally in my direction. Even though I could feel the weight of her stare, I managed to keep my eyes on the road and hold onto the steering wheel a bit more tightly than I should have. My mind replayed the entire dinner scene, each word and glare getting more intense with each playback. We arrived home and I sank into the couch after shrugging off my coat. There was silence in the house. The only sound that broke the silence was the gentle hum of the refrigerator. Sarah took a seat beside me. She had a determined and concerned look on her face. She didn't mince words. She revealed to me that she had been silently witnessing my family take advantage of me for years. Her words struck hard because they were true, even though they weren't intended to cause pain. I had always gone above and beyond for them, and she pointed that out. I had responded without hesitation to the emergency calls and the never-ending checks. The things I had given up for which I never received gratitude. Sarah brought to mind how my father's approval felt more like a leash than a boon. How my brother's needs always seemed to take precedence over mine, and how my mother had always used guilt to control me. She was honest, not angry, and I knew in my heart that all of that was true, so it hurt. As I sat there, I kept thinking about the times in the past, such as when my mother called me crying and said they would lose the house if I didn't help. Later, I learned that they had been preparing for a trip, or that Ryan had borrowed money to fix his car, only to arrive a week later with a new gaming console. Even Ethan, who was having financial difficulties, was skilled at obtaining funds for weekend trips and concert tickets while conveniently neglecting to reimburse me. I had overlooked the pattern for too long because, after all, family helps family. Sarah's voice interrupted my train of thought. She made me realize what was important right now, the one we were creating, our family. Our child should be the priority, not the afterthought, she said, placing my hand on her belly. In my mind, it was like a switch flipping. I had been operating on autopilot for years, following the rules without considering whether they were just or sustainable. But now that I was looking to the future and developing inside of Sarah, everything became clear. As I stretched myself to satisfy everyone else's expectations while ignoring my own needs and goals, I came to the realization that I had been pouring from an empty cup. The more I helped, the less my family seemed to appreciate it, and they had taken my assistance for granted. Money wasn't the only factor. It had to do with boundaries and respect. I had neglected to establish certain things because I was too scared of disappointing them. I made a choice that night while I lay in bed and gazed at the ceiling. Reducing the amount of money I gave them wasn't the only thing at stake. I wanted to take back my life and give my child the kind of example I desired. I couldn't continue to give up my security and happiness for those who viewed me merely as a resource. It was time to set boundaries for Sarah and our unborn child, as well as for myself. They were entitled to a father and husband free from responsibility and guilt. I explained my plan to Sarah the following morning. I was going to have a final conversation with my family, but I would not be negotiating this time. My offer of $2,500 wasn't a concession. This was the last offer. The payments would then completely cease. After years of my assistance, it was time for them to make their own decisions. Sarah nodded, her expression composed yet determined. She didn't say much, but I could tell everything I needed to know from the way she squeezed my hand. I felt like I had clarity for the first time in years. The burden on my chest no longer felt as oppressive, and I was confident that I was acting in the best interests of Sarah, our child, and myself, regardless of the outcome of the talk with my family. I prepared for the talk for the remainder of the day. I mentally reviewed everything, expecting their arguments, guilt trips, and outbursts of rage. But whatever the case, I wasn't going to back down. They were no longer the focus of this. It was about defending my family and at last prioritizing us. I experienced an odd mixture of resolve and anxiety as the sun went down that night. For the first time, I wasn't scared of the consequences, even though I knew the conversation wouldn't be simple. I couldn't continue living my life according to my family's expectations, even though they might not comprehend and may never forgive me. At all costs, it was time to regain control. I felt weighed down on the morning of the visit to my parents' house. I knew it wasn't fair to drag Sarah into yet another family dispute, so I left her at home. This was my battle, and I was going to fight to the end. I practiced my remarks while driving to their house, but I knew in my heart that they would somehow misrepresent what I had to say. They had a pattern like that: guilt, deception, and manipulation under the guise of concern. My mother met me at the door when I got there. Her eyes were sharp, her smile forced. My brothers and father had already taken their seats in the living room. Tension was in the air before I'd even said a word. My father started talking about sacrifice, loyalty, and family before I had a chance to sit down. Ryan and Ethan quickly followed suit, repeating the same stale justifications about how much they depended on me and how my contributions had kept the family afloat. However, this was not a conversation. An ambush occurred. They didn't want to hear my side of the story or accept the sacrifices I had already made. Rather, they viewed my visit as a chance to exert pressure on me to change my mind. I gave them space to speak. They enumerated all the reasons I owed them, more their voices overlapping. Even though I was tired, I remained silent, waiting for the right opportunity to break through the clamor. Even though my heart was racing, I spoke steadily. I informed them that I wasn't there to debate or defend my decisions. I clarified that I wouldn't change the decision to lower the monthly payments and that it wasn't made hastily. I reminded them that my priorities had changed and that I now had my own family to consider. Before my words could fully register, the conversation descended into animosity. After accusing Sarah of poisoning me against him, my father's face darkened. With a nod of agreement, my mother described Sarah as controlling and selfish, her voice quivering. Ryan and Ethan even added that I became aloof and irrational after I married her. I resisted letting them see how painful their attack was. I was aware that they were attempting to break me by making me feel bad enough to give in. However, it didn't work this time. I calmly explained to them that blaming Sarah was unfair and wrong and that she had nothing to do with my choice. I reminded them that I had been there for them consistently for years, long before Sarah and I had even met, and that their inability to accept responsibility for their own lives was the true problem, not her influence. At that point, my father struck me in a way I hadn't anticipated. With a stern and cold voice, he stood up and warned me that if I abandoned my financial commitments, I would also abandon the family. Family, he said, was not something you could choose when it was convenient, and I didn't belong if I couldn't be relied upon to contribute. For a brief moment, the words lingered in the air like a death knell. I could feel their weight. The finality of his statement. However, as I surveyed my brothers' and parents' faces around the room, I came to a realization. They were no longer my family. Not in the important way. Family was meant to be about respect for one another, love and support. Our relationship was transactional, with dollar signs serving as a gauge of my worth. With each step I took toward the door, my resolve grew stronger. I didn't try to convince them of my point of view or engage in an argument. They obviously never would. I turned back just long enough to record the moment, not because I hesitated, but as I reached for the doorknob. I wished them well and expressed my hope that they would work things out, but I would not be returning. It was like taking off a thick coat when you left that house. I had years of caring. For the first time in a long time, I felt as though I could breathe in the crisp air outside. I reflected on what had transpired, the relationships I had severed, and the burden I had left behind as I drove home. Although it wasn't painless or easy, it was required. Sarah was waiting for me when I arrived home. Her face was a mixture of relief and worry. I explained the situation to her, every accusation, every word. She did not interrupt as she listened. She put her hand on mine. She just told me that I had done the right thing when I was done, and I believed it for the first time. I experienced an odd range of emotions as I lay in bed that night. I was grieving for the family I believed I had, and holding out hope for the future I was creating. Although I had no idea what would happen next, I was certain of one thing. There was no turning back now that I'd finally taken charge of my life. It only took a few days for the negative effects of my decision to sever my family's ties to surface. My brothers and parents posted a ton of carefully worded accusations that were meant to make me look like the bad guy on my social media feed. Although they didn't specifically mention me, anyone who knew us could tell. Phrases like, "family deserves loyalty, not abandonment," and "some people forget where they come from," were strewn all over their pages, eliciting pity from friends and family. Even more hurtful were the remarks below. Individuals who were unaware of the true situation expressed their support for my parents by accusing me of being ungrateful and self-centered. Even though the words were hurtful, I didn't answer. I had no intention of giving them that satisfying action, and engaging would only entangle me further in their web of manipulation. In the midst of the confusion, Aunt Linda's voice unexpectedly reached out to me. For as long as I could remember, she had been the family's black sheep. I had grown up hearing tales of her leaving the family, relocating, and severing ties, back then. I had come to believe the story my parents had taught me, but now I had a different perspective. Linda called me in a soothing, calm voice. She wanted to let me know that she completely understood what I was going through after seeing the post. In many ways, her story was similar to mine. She had been coerced into giving my grandparents financial support years prior, but she was always being asked for more. The family turned against her when she finally made a decision, accusing her of being cold-hearted and self-centered. It was like the first time you looked into a mirror as she described those experiences. I felt less isolated. She reminded me that defending myself wasn't just about the money. It was also about refusing to be controlled and ending a toxic cycle that had been allowed to continue for too long. I was reminded that I wasn't the issue by Linda's words, which were a lifeline. A family dynamic based on entitlement and control was the issue. Despite Linda's assistance, the pressure persisted. The next thing my mother did was leave a heartfelt voicemail. As she talked about her declining health, her voice faltered. She said my actions were stressing her out, and if I really cared about her, I would change my mind. The message was well written and intended to appeal to all of my emotional vulnerabilities. I briefly experienced the well-known pull of guilt. However, I was reminded by Linda's words that this was just another ploy, one more attempt to take charge. My mother had always been skilled at using her health to her advantage, and I wasn't going to fall for it this time. I didn't answer and erased the voicemail. My resolve is unwavering, but my heart is heavy. I told Sarah everything that evening. Quietly, she listened. Her face was a mixture of pride and pity. She said she had never been more proud of me when I was done. Her words gave me the willpower to continue, but they didn't take away the hurt of what was happening. I was fighting for more than myself. The family was what I was fighting for. We were creating a family free from the poison I had been exposed to growing up. I was done playing their game, but the battle with my family was far from over. I wasn't going to back down even if they posted anything they wanted and spread any lies they thought were necessary. I had the advantage for the first time, and I had no intention of giving it up. It wasn't simple, but I had to make the decision to stop providing for my family. Every deceptive post voicemail filled with guilt and muttered accusation only made me more determined. I was now aware that their love had always been conditional, and I no longer wanted to incur that cost. Maintaining their stability and happiness at the expense of my own was not my responsibility. My life had changed in ways I never would have thought possible. A few weeks later, Sarah and I held our daughter Ella for the first time after she was born. I experienced an unadulterated, unconditional love that I had never experienced from my own family. Despite her fragility and small size, she became my fulcrum in that instant. When I looked at her, everything I had been fighting for, the boundaries, the tough talks, the painful breaks, made sense. With Ella's arrival, she deserved parents free from toxic expectations, able to fully concentrate on creating a loving and safe home. My priorities took a further turn. Diaper changes and restless nights became the new normal, but I didn't mind. Every grin and small handshake served as a reminder of the reasons behind my decisions. I became closer to Sarah than before. For the first time in years, I felt completely at peace as we reaffirmed our commitment to one another and our daughter. My family's pressure started to lessen over time. It wasn't instantaneous, and it wasn't without its last attempts. In a final passive-aggressive email, my father accused me of leaving them when they were in need. My mother started posting veiled pity plays on social media instead of direct attacks. Ever the opportunists, Ryan and Ethan made a few attempts to coerce me into doing me smaller favors, but I stopped them before they could get traction. The messages and calls eventually ceased and vanished into the distance. Although it wasn't a perfect break, it was sufficient. They understood that I wouldn't compromise, and I understood that I could proceed without their consent. The bonds that had previously felt like chains had been severed, and a peaceful freedom that I had never experienced before had taken their place. With Sarah and Ella, each day seemed like a tiny triumph. I threw myself into being a husband and father, enjoying the small things in life. It made Ella laugh the first time. After putting Sarah to bed, I spent some quiet time with her, the straightforward tranquility of knowing this was the life I had chosen for myself. The atmosphere felt lighter as a result of my family's expectations no longer hovering over me. In hindsight, I realized that severing ties involved more than just stopping financial support. Redefining what family meant to me was the goal. It had nothing to do with blood or duty. It was about respect, love, and caring for one another. I was determined to give Sarah and Ella the life they deserved because they were now my family. Although there were some scars from the journey, I wouldn't alter a thing. I felt for the first time that I was living my life according to my own terms because of the choices I had made that had brought me to this point. Elle's little hand was gripping my finger as I held her in my arms. I was certain I had made the right decision. It was my home, my family, and my future. And it was sufficient. Story 3. Brandon is my name. My age is and I've been the one behind the curtain for as long as I can remember. While my family grinned for the pictures, I was discreetly pulling the threads, arranging, paying, repairing, and smoothing things out. That's not what I say to sound honorable. It's simply the way it has always been. I was the planner, the trustworthy one, and the responsible one. I was already assisting my younger siblings with their homework and making appointments for my mom's doctor's visits when I was 12. Dad used to call me the glue and give me a pat on the back, but glue never gets a thank you. Until it cracks, it merely keeps everything together. This year was Dad's 65th birthday, a significant amount. Retirement, Medicare, everything. I assumed that I would go all out. Every time he expressed his desire to travel to the Caribbean, a bright sunny place with unending buffets and crystal clear water. 6 months before the trip, I began organizing it. I looked into shore excursions, rooms, and cruise lines. In order to get a personalized cake with the words "Happy 65th Captain Kin" inscribed in gold icing, I even worked with the ship's events manager. I spent a total of $200 on the vacation. I remained still. I did this for my father. Not only for him either. It was for everyone in the family. For my parents, I reserved cottages. Kevin, my younger brother, and his spouse. Myself, my sister Gina, and Lisa, her girlfriend. There are 7 of us. I ensured that everyone had a paid itinerary and a private balcony. Scuba diving in St. Thomas. San Juan zipline. In Barbados sampling rum. Everything. I even created custom baggage tags. I was reviewing my packing list at my work 3 days prior to the vacation. It was a group text from Gina when my phone died. "Just so you know, Brandon, we gave Lisa your cottage instead. According to Dad, she makes him laugh more and he wants to spend the trip with her." I hope that's cool. I read it again after blinking at the screen. To be sure I hadn't missed a joke, I scrolled higher. Perhaps they were planning a surprise and this was part of it. Not at all. Kevin's response was, "LOL, classic dad." Lisa used a heart emoji in response. Nobody spoke to me. Nobody inquired about my feelings about relinquishing the place I had paid for. Nobody even bothered to express gratitude. They treated me like a stray extra who had gone off to their holiday, bumping my hotel, my trip, and my card. For a while, I just sat there. Not upset, not quite yet. Mostly in a state of shock. You are familiar with the constricted sensation behind your eyelids, similar to the buildup to a storm. That was how it felt. The realization that this was nothing new came slowly and bitterly. It was only the priciest iteration of an ancient design. They constantly took, and I always gave. Lisa had more humor. Lisa was more entertaining. Lisa was nearer to me and the family. The organizer was me, the backup plan, the wallet. I took a good look at the message before responding. Make a copy of that. I only stated that. Not cool, not okay. 2 terms with a wide range of meanings. They didn't inquire further. I poured myself some whiskey that evening. I turned on my laptop and signed into all of the reservation portals that were available to me. The group airport transfer, the cake seller, the cruise line, and even the private island tour. I canceled all of them and made arrangements to send everyone to the port. The problem with being the planner, the fixer, and the glue is this. Everything was in my name, including the booking confirmation and the password. 3:24 a.m. Gina sent me an SMS. "Hello, just making sure. Has the snorkeling trip been canceled? The app does not display it." I didn't respond. Kevin added, "Bro, why does the cruise booking say no active reservation at 4:11 a.m.? What's happening?" Didn't respond yet. 6 a.m. My mother called. I let it to ring. After that, I switched off my phone and took a stroll. While some repercussions was to be expected, what transpired next was a cascade. It seems that my parents had previously discussed the cruise with all of their acquaintances. Both Gina and Kevin had taken time off from their jobs. They had set up automated light timers, dog sitters, and daycare. For the trip, Lisa reportedly purchased a whole new beach attire, tagging it on Instagram with the hashtag #CruiseQueen. And now nothing. Don't travel, not a cake, no beach. Even their enhanced drink packages were canceled by me. However, it wasn't the end. The satisfying part wasn't even that. Because I was organizing my own sea for the last few years while they were rushing, contacting support, ranting with customer service representatives, and trying to rebook at the last minute only to discover that everything was either sold out or quadruple the price. In a house I owned, my parents had been living for free. I inherited the house from my grandpa, so technically it was still in my name. It made sense, so I'd let them remain there. They were mortgage-free. I didn't require the location. And I felt like a good son because of it. Though once I saw that sentence, everything changed. I thus got in touch with a property management business, scheduled a thorough inspection, and delivered a formal notice of tenancy termination. 3 days later, the locks were replaced. The utility accounts no longer included their name. They were utilizing a shared Verizon family plan that I terminated under my name. Their storage unit, of course, paid until the end of the month before being scheduled for removal. I didn't yell. It wasn't a dramatic email that I wrote. I just relocated each component individually. The worst part is that they didn't even know the trip was canceled until the day before their scheduled departure. They arrived at the harbor wearing similar t-shirts that read "Dad's 65th ship happens," smiling and carrying luggage. However, no check-in was made. No reservations, no cabin, not a cake, no Brandon. That only served as the warm-up. It was already too late when they recognized what had transpired. Since I started receiving calls once more, I am aware of this. Not messages. Voicemails and calls from confused and desperate people. Some are enraged, while some are only begging. It appears that there has been some sort of error, Brandon honey. The first message came through with Mom's voice crackling. "We're not on the list the cruise line claims. Would you please give them a call? You made all the reservations correct, Kevin again." All okay, man. Not amusing. As if we understand. You're angry. Lisa's statements were meaningless. "Give me a call. Let's make this right." There was no voicemail from Gina. She just made 7 consecutive calls. Lisa. For the first time in weeks, she sent me a message. "Actually, Brandon, I know we started off badly, but this is a huge event for your dad. Don't spoil his special day over a misunderstanding, Before I clicked, I watched her message go unread for an hour, observed. Since it wasn't about the trip at that point, rather it was about every family portrait I took for them, and being instructed to stand behind the camera, I didn't respond. All of them. I appreciate your planning. Every Christmas I spent cleaning dishes I never received. Every Brandon will take care of things, treating me like a live assistant while the joy was watching football. Rather than their son, their sibling. I had given them the benefit of the doubt for years, telling myself that they loved me, that they were only in the moment, and that they didn't mean it. Simply didn't convey it in the same manner. However, I paid for and handed it to Lisa with a nonchalant, "She makes Dad laugh more," after they stole my room, which was my actual wager on the trip. I realized then that they still remembered me. They simply didn't believe that I was important. Then they were outdoors now, literally, because they returned to the house I used to let them reside in 3 days after the disastrous cruise and were unable to enter. With my car parked across the street, my windows tinted, and my sunglasses on, I watched. I wanted to see it because I needed it to feel real, not because I was cruel. For once, I wanted them to experience the same sense of exclusion I did, not welcome. The handle was first tried by a small mother, then the subsequent doorbell, fumbling with his keys. The previous evening, I had had my locks changed. Once more they rang. I was knocked. I saw the bewilderment turn to annoyance, then to fear. Kevin took his phone out. I could infer what he observed. Due to non-payment and unauthorized subletting, they were given 30 days to leave the property by a forwarded legal notice that I had printed and emailed. Technically true thanks to Lisa crashing there without notice a few weeks prior. Gina stormed to the side of the house and tried the back door. I'd had that reinforced too. Eventually they noticed the neighbor watching the same neighborhood once asked me why I never came to the barbecues, then laughed when I said I wasn't invited. She gave me a nod as I drove off that afternoon. The texts turned angrier after that. You had to know, right? Where are we supposed to go, Branda? This is insane. You're acting like a stranger. Lisa's post about the cruise quietly disappeared from her feed. Then the real unraveling began. Dad's old business partner texted me to ask why the emergency fund wasn't responding to payment requests. Turns out my name was still attached as co-signer. Another thing I'd been too helpful to change, so I did. I moved the money to a trust under my name. Legal. Clean. I even called to confirm there was no breach of contract. There wasn't. Next came the streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, Spotify. Family plan, all canceled. Passwords changed. Email logins locked. A week later, I got a call from Mom. I stared at it, didn't answer. Then another voicemail. She sounded tired, smaller. Brandon, we don't know what to do. Your dad's sleeping on Kevin's couch and Jenny's staying with friends. I know you're angry, but this is your family. We're not perfect, but we love you. Can we please just talk? I sat on my couch surrounded by silence. No laughter, no noise, no obligation, just tranquility. And then I got another message from Jenna this time. No greeting, no apology. Just, are you seriously going to throw away your entire family over a joke? That's when something shifted in me. Because it wasn't just a joke, it was a summary. A distillation of every moment I'd been told I was less than every time they pushed me aside. I then acted shocked when I didn't stick around to pick up the pieces. I thought about replying. Instead, I started writing something else. Not to them, to the lawyer, because this wasn't just a vacation anymore. This was a full reset, and they hadn't even seen the worst part yet. I didn't reply to Jenny's message. I didn't need to. I was already several steps ahead drafting documents with my attorney to formalize what had already begun. A clean separation. Emotionally, financially, legally. There was no major encounter, no shouting match. I didn't hurl dishes or yell that I was done since I had been done softly, gently in the manner. You stop watering a plant not out of malice, but because you understand it was never yours to take care of in the first place. The lawyer's office was a tiny spot situated between a bakery and a tailor shop downtown. Nothing spectacular, but it felt decisive. We met in person. I brought a list carefully written cross-referenced. My name was still on, more than I realized. My parents' health insurance copay account, a line of credit they'd been utilizing for years in case of crises. The registration on the family automobile remained in my name from when I helped refinance it 5 years ago. I ordered the lawyer to transfer, revoke, dissolve, or close everything, whichever would remove the relationships fastest. And that storage unit, I had it open. I didn't discard anything. I'm not that individual. However, because Dad was staying at Kevin's, I paid movers to have everything packed up and sent there. On top of the boxes, the invoice was taped. At this point, the message's tone changed once again. They had lost their anger. They didn't understand. I was hurt. It's almost theatrical. This isn't you, Brandon. Could we just take a seat like grown-ups? You're taking revenge. Hateful that one stayed with me. I nearly burst out laughing at the irony, because I had always been understanding, forgiving, and accommodating for these years. Kevin destroyed his car and required a trip from the police station by himself, so I missed my college graduation. Jen, rent money twice without ever requesting reimbursement. In an attempt to cheer them up following Dad's operation last fall, I sent Mom and Dad to Vermont. I did it for no recognition. I think that's what family was meant to be, therefore I did it. However, they didn't. Not at all. My generosity wasn't love to them, it was inventory. A resource is anything that can be distributed, utilized, assumed. The day I discovered the voicemail made that very obvious. I hadn't spoken to that person in years. Uncle Denny, the younger brother of my dad, he got into a fight with his father about a little matter. Dennis never paid back the money he borrowed, according to Dad. Dad lied about a loan, Dennis said. That never took place. Who can tell the truth, but I nearly didn't respond when Dennis called me out of the blue. He sounded lower than I had recalled. Slower, as if each syllable had to be drawn from the depths. I don't want to interfere, but I believe you ought to be aware, Brandon. The other day your mom left a message on your aunt's phone. I was unaware that it was still recording. She was ranting about you, saying that this whole situation is simply another instance of your constant pretense of superiority. Said that you're punishing them because you can't bear to see other people happy and that you've never understood what it takes to make sacrifices. He hesitated. I wanted to share it with you. I said very little. I just thanked him. I hung up and sat in quiet, although I told him I appreciated the call. Not even the words were painful. It was the affirmation. The knowledge that after everything they were still blind to their mistakes. They continued to portray themselves as the victims in a narrative that I had no desire to create. The next day, I revised my will, took all of my family members off of the beneficiaries list, and established a new trust that would fund first-generation college student scholarships. Silently, there are no structures or plaques bearing my name. Just something practical, something tangible. I changed my phone number the same week. New carrier, new account, new phone. Only my best buddy Sam, my lawyer, and my assistant were given the number. It was Sam who brought 2 six-packs and a bag of tacos over that evening. He remained silent, asked if I wanted to watch something that wasn't about family, and then offered me a drink. We watched an outdated action film with predictable explosions and awful dialogue. It was flawless. The knock on my door came at that moment. I had no expectations, no deliveries, no appointments. I went to check on the people while you did the TV, Sam. Jenna was the one. Hair secured. She has dark circles beneath her eyes. She held her phone tightly in one hand. In the other was what appeared to be a folder. She didn't appear upset. She appeared exhausted. The door was not opened by me. Softer this time, she knocked. I just want to talk, Brandon. I stood behind the door and watched her. Not talking, not moving. Then she said it. It has to do with Dad. Something took place. A gentle knock again, then a softer one. In Kevin's backyard, he fell off a ladder. He's okay. Bruised ribs and a sprained wrist. He's afraid, though. He's requesting you. I remained silent, not by way of the door, not in my mind. I wasn't cold in my silence. Clarity was the key. I was no longer the anxious, eager to please son. I didn't feel guilt surging up or some compulsion to rush to his side and fix everything. I just felt curious. I was wondering what angle this was. Curious if they still thought this was a game of leverage. I know we messed up, Jenna said after a long pause. I know you don't trust us. Maybe you never should have, but he's asking for you, Brandon. Not Kevin, not even Lisa. You. I finally opened the door, not because she said the right thing, but because I was ready to look her in the eye. And when I did, I saw it. Not manipulation, not a properly rehearsed script, just fatigue. And maybe a shard of comprehension. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her voice when she spoke again was rough. He stated he wanted to apologize. I gave a nod. So let him. She seemed bewildered. To you, Brandon? Not in a group SMS. Not through me, to you. I went outside and slammed the light door behind me. Didn't ask her inside. She gave me the folder after we stood on the porch for a minute. I opened it. A note in Dad's blocky, uneven handwriting was inside. It was brief. I'm not very good at saying the correct words, Brandon. Not at all. I am aware that I have relied too much on you. Too much was expected. I also realize that I never truly gave you the gratitude I deserved. The slack was always taken by you. And by pretending it didn't matter, I made it worse. I allowed others to belittle you. I occasionally joined in. I'm responsible for it. I apologize. None of it was fair to you. I hope you're content right now. Dad, you deserve to be. I waited to feel anything as I stood there reading it again. Anger, verification, sadness. But I just sensed the reality of it. Although it wasn't flawless, the apology was sincere. Jenna gave me a glance. Did you decide not to call, claimed that he assumed you would hang up if he phoned? Block him if he texted you. She was not mistaken. She went on, I'm not here to guilt you. I wanted to let you know that he's making an effort. I gave a nod. Gave the folder back, closing it. Inform him I received the letter. Would you like to know? Slowly, she nodded once more. Also for the first time in a long time. She didn't dispute. Okay, she responded simply, and made her way back to her vehicle. The following day, I saw her drive away. I mailed Kevin a little package. There was a post-it note and a laminated copy of the letter. I appreciate the letter. We're through, but I accept your apologies. Be careful. I didn't require anything more. I would not return. I didn't require any staged forgiveness. Arc a tearful reunion or a dramatic confrontation. I had no desire to gradually reintegrate them into my life, one text at a time. The chapter was closed. I choose to spend the ensuing months creating something greater instead. I formally opened the scholarship fund I had established and named it after my grandpa, who bequeathed me the dramatizing mansion. I paid for the first 3 students' debt-free community college educations. We met and spoke with them, provided them with the type of assistance I wish I had received when I was their age. I had always wanted to visit Portugal, but I kept putting it off till later, so Sam and I did just that. For the first time in decades, I felt as I stood on the cliffs overlooking the ocean, as if I were no longer holding my breath. I sold the family home at a respectable profit and used the proceeds to invest in a small nonprofit incubator for first-generation business owners. I also purchased a tiny condo in the city. None of it was aired by me. Didn't publish anything online. I kept my family in the dark. After the voyage, I only lived for a year or so. That never took place. A letter arrived in the mail, no address for return. There was a picture of a photo dad with a cast on his chair arm, grinning clumsily at the rear camera. We still speak about you, it stated. Lisa finally learned how to make the stew you enjoyed. She always burns it. I figured you'd like that. All right, I grinned but didn't answer. There was no closure. Those words must also be definitive. Freedom was what I received. Freedom from constantly being the fixer and the helper. The emotional trash can. Freedom to decide who may and cannot access me. I never lost interest in them. I just stopped allowing them to treat me like a disposable object. They can accept the repercussions, and at last I began life according to my own terms.